SBDC office of the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center. And we are joined by Chaz Frutel, who is the director of the deck. And Chaz, even though it's kind of a rainy day outside, it's a beautiful day to be at the deck.
It certainly is. It's definitely coming down today, and I suppose we'd have a few inches of snow if it was a little bit colder. So it's we're going in the right direction as far as getting warmer weather. But Mike, it's always a pleasure to work with you and your team at SBDC here locally in Central Ohio, and for now quite some time we've been doing events together since back in 2009 when the deck first got started, and it's just been a great partnership all along, and we just appreciate all that you do for businesses in Central Ohio. But want to just welcome everybody to this next iteration of our monthly program, and looking forward to hearing our guest speaker Andy as well. But just to share a little bit about the deck, I'm very proud now to be in our 15th year of serving Central Ohio as the first entrepreneur center in Central Ohio, and certainly one of the largest in the United States, offering services on a local basis. And in Dublin, we certainly welcome businesses from any part of Central Ohio, and certainly have actually businesses that are located from around the country that had offices at the deck as well. So we provide office space and conference rooms and complimentary Wi-Fi and just all kinds of great services to anybody that might need to have mail service clear to just to be able to drop in and be able to have a place for meetings and that kind of thing. So we love providing that type of service to Central Ohio. We've graduated over 200 businesses from the Dublin Entrepreneurial Center, and over 80% of those are still in business today over that 15-year period of time. So very proud of that, and it's certainly due to partners like SBDC that are able to provide those kind of services right there at the deck, which is great. But again, looking forward to today's topic. And Mike, thanks so much for the introduction.
Great. Thank you very much. I want to mention, I always come back, I've been involved with the deck, as Chad said, for a number of years. And one of the things that I've always liked about the deck, one is the community. So there's opportunities to, connect with other entrepreneurs and different things of that nature, because I think that this is really focused on really those kind of entrepreneurs that are looking to grow and take it to the next level. But the other thing that I always find it's interesting is that I spend, a good bit of time here on the weekends, and there's always stuff going on, and it's always interesting that there's entrepreneurs and there's folks that are using the conference rooms, probably using some of the rooms downstairs. They're using the cafe, different things like that. It's it's not just a 9 to 5 kind of thing. And it's a lot of stuff going on the weekends. And as an entrepreneur, if this is something that you need, and you do a lot of things on the weekends, do some events, do some trainings, do some things like that, this might be a great option for you. So be sure, if you have an interest, to look up the deck and contact Chaz or Susie and ask them about what some of the opportunities are. Mm-hmm. So with that, let's go ahead and move on. We're going to move on to speaking to our guest. Our guest today is Andy Milligan. He is a graphic designer, and he is the owner of MMG Designs. Andy, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Michael. I'm really excited to be here. I'm always down to chat, design, graphic design, web design. So, we've had a long chat already, so I feel like this might just be a continuation, but thank you for having me.
No, this will be great. This will be great. So, one, if anybody in the audience has a question, feel free to go ahead and put that in the chat, whether it's tied to kind of entrepreneurship, or whether it's tied to the design work or branding or something like that. Go ahead and throw it in there. And I would encourage you that, in addition to this one, go ahead and check out some of the previous episodes of Small Business Breakthroughs, where we've had complementary entrepreneurs or complementary service providers. So marketing and other types of things that work really well along with this. So, Andy, why don't we get started? If you want to kind of share a little bit about your journey that's led you to be a business owner in this graphic design space, and really what's led you to be this, you know, in the graphic space, period. So if you'd like to share a little bit there, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll spare you the long version. I'll definitely cut straight with the short version because in and of itself, that it's too many events to even recount. But I moved to Marysville about 6 months ago, my first place. I graduated from the University of Findlay last spring. Moved down here, worked at a graphic design job at the Rudis Apparel Company on Square Drive in Marysville for about 6 to 8 months. And then as of 3 weeks ago, just started the design company full time. I really got into graphic design, web design, branding from my background in college. Got into this group. It was called the Oiler 10 marketing team. And if you guys don't know, the Oiler 10 marketing team, they partner with small businesses that are local in Findlay, and they work in exchange for donations to the university. So you can basically work with a team of like-minded people. We meet at 5:30 in the mornings on Wednesday. It's a good way to kind of filter out the people that don't want to be there. So I learned a lot from that group as far as discipline and really showing up for yourself and for your team and perfecting your craft and just learning. But basically, you could take that opportunity to pick an area of design, business, and make kind of your own brand out of it, and use a project with a small business to partner with them, learn every aspect of it. So anyway, the first project I took on was a brand design identity for a local brewery. It's called Woodford Brewing Company. And this ended up being about a 6 month project where I worked really close with the business owners. I got to know everything about, the problems they face, their customer base, the research they've done, go through their whole business plan, and tying that bridge from business to the design aspect and working together with them to really create a logo, a brand identity, colors, website, social media, all this stuff that represented their passion, their brand, was just so fulfilling. And I guess I should say I never stopped. And even during, since I've only been doing this full time now as of 3 weeks, I haven't stopped doing that freelance. Been working with a couple really awesome partners in different industries. And I know, Michael, you helped me a little bit about kind of refining the people that you want to work with, knowing who your own ideal customer is. Um, as of right now, it's been people from different industries, a couple people in the boating industry in Florida, a lot of my past connections in the golf industry, and getting to kind of know all these different industries and the role that design and branding plays to represent their own business and set themselves apart. Is something that keeps me coming back every day. So I'm always excited to chat, design and branding and how that ties to business because it's taught me a lot so far.
Absolutely. So what has been your experience as you've kind of shifted from kind of this freelance world to, what I would classify more as doing a business? Now, both of them are businesses and both of them obviously have things going on, but, what's been your experience in the short time that you transitioned into the more structured business piece where you're going to be having a little bit more than just kind of you looking for somebody to work?
Yeah, man. Again, the short version, because I've definitely learned a lot about myself and the business as a whole in the past couple weeks. Like, I feel like I've aged like 20 years. I'm probably getting some gray hairs already, but we'll save that for another day. But just since transitioning full time, I've learned a lot. I've become a lot more self-aware, kind of as, okay, how do I prioritize the things that I'm good at and use them to serve other people? And you really have to be self-aware and knowing what other people are coming back to you for, what you enjoy doing the most. And you have to have self-discipline, I had a misconception, I think a lot of people do, maybe if you're working a full-time job before you've made the full transition, that you need these artificial constraints, like you need the 9 to 5 structure to be able to show up for yourself every day, to be able to have that self-discipline. And I mean, I learned that I didn't. I also had the misconception about myself that I wasn't a great speaker, that I couldn't go to these events and make connections and elaborate upon what I did and how it served and added value to other people's lives. Like, and breaking free from those, like I had those misconceptions in my head my whole life, and I think a lot of people do, is that you kind of grow up and you live with these conceptions about who you are and what kind of a business person you are. And I would challenge people to just, kind of step out of their comfort zone. Because it took me all of just a couple weeks to prove that I can do, social events and, get started on my own business and make it work full time. So, and I never thought I would be capable of that myself, but it's getting started full time is definitely a big transition. And I think for a lot of people, when you do it at first, the thing that you freelanced is no longer a hobby. Like, it's something that you're doing a lot more, but you still have to appreciate it with the same kind of joy, and do it naturally, pursue your curiosity. So some of it is kind of orienting your schedule to reflect the things that you enjoy doing the most. And then, okay, maybe working back from that, how can I work towards creating a schedule that maybe outsources or does less of some of the stuff that maybe I'm not as skilled at, or um, that I don't enjoy doing as much? How can I kind of work towards getting that out of my schedule? And it's been a slow, long process. Takes a lot of patience. But I mean, when you know from the beginning that you're in something for the long haul, it's you kind of go into it with the mindset that, okay, I'm going to be doing this for a long time. And with an experiential mindset too. So knowing, like, I mean, not attaching emotions to outcomes so much. Like, if people reject, because you're gonna get you're gonna get rejected all the time. Like, it's a fact of what's gonna happen. Your service isn't for everyone, and that's why I would really encourage people to get to know people that you enjoy working with the most. Really refine your ideal customer. Um, just all these basics, and because your service is not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. But if you go into it with the experiential mindset of, this is all experience. A rejection is as a learning experience. How can I improve from it? How can I make it more tailored to the people that I want to work with and add the most value to? Um, Jim Collins, I don't know how many of the audience are readers, but Jim Collins has this book called Good to Great, and he has this thing called the hedgehog principle. And it's like a three-circle Venn diagram of what you can be best in the world at, what you add the most value in, how you help the most people, and what you can make the most money doing. So if you approach that, not just, I would encourage people to approach it with that mindset before you start your business. But once you're in it as well, the actions that you can take every day that fall in the middle of that, um, and just try and intersect all those three things, is something that I try and, consciously think about every day, moving forward. So there's a lot of different things I've learned, but I'd say those are the most prominent so far.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great concept, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs get into it because this is just something they like to do. And that's where they gravitate toward. They do all of the stuff around the things that they like to do. So whether that's building a product or product design or things around that, some of them, really like that human interaction. So they want to go out and they want to meet people and do different things, but they don't come back and actually do the business part. And your earlier comment about having to really understand the design piece that you really like, and then the business piece that is fine, but you didn't get into it to do accounting, I'm assuming.
Right.
So it's one of those where you just that you get to do these things, but it does take discipline and it does take an effort for you to be able to do those things and not miss it, because that's where, again, a lot of businesses get into a hole.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the bigger misconceptions I had was that, like, I'm going to be doing design all day. Like, I'm not going to have any breaks. And ironically, Michael, in the first 2 to 3 weeks, starting to make it more of a transition towards actual focus work. But in the first 2 to 3 weeks, it was so much. I was doing less design than I did at my full-time job, and I would only do that in the evening. So I was always booking my calendar full of events, making connections and outreaches, and it taught me that sometimes that this whole concept of working on the business versus working in the business. So I would say the times I'm fulfilling, a customer facing work, designs, turnaround times, doing the actual in the software, video editing, photo editing, stuff like that. That's working in the business. But when you're working on the business, you kind of detach, take a step back. That's more the admin, the emails, stuff that can make progress towards, your next step. And kind of this concept of forward thinking and backwards planning, and being able to detach a little bit and kind of see how the actions that you're doing, aside from the actual thing that's serving the customer, all the stuff that goes into it behind the scenes is a totally different perspective that I hadn't invested nearly enough time into before. So
Yeah, that's great. Great information. Um, so we didn't talk about this, but what, where do you see this company a year from now? Kind of what's your vision of where you want to go with this?
yeah, it's ever changing. I like to think that I'm, like I said, a forward thinker, and I have a lot of stuff planned out. A lot of the people I've gotten advice from, and I'd be curious to hear your take on it as well, is you should always optimize when you're building a business as if you're building it to sell. And I read the book Built to Sell. I can't remember the name of the author, but you systematize everything to a point where if you were to hand it off to someone else, you can totally detach from it. And there's a lot that goes into this, from building an SOP library to building people around you that, know the values, what you trust, establishing your own brand, something that, we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But you create these systems and processes that are repeatable, that you can explain well, that scale, obviously, and that you can onboard to someone else. And that's something that I'm constantly looking at right now, is how do I make everything simple as possible, not just for me, but if I had to totally step back and bring in partners and bring it on to someone else. And that is very hard for a service-based business, especially when you're the one that's customer facing, you're doing the actual design work. But when you start to look at it from a more business mindset, you want to create a system where you can step back and have other people take over. When it comes to the road for MMG, I would say I want it to grow. I want to continue to service people that I'm already working with. Um, and something else we talked about, Michael, was that your existing customers are your best customers. So balancing the desire to scale and work with new and exciting people, um, but also servicing the people that you already have well, because they're the reason that you are where you are. Um, and hopefully it comes to a point where I have a lot more optionality in my schedule. I think the greatest part of owning anything, any owning any enterprise that you have control over, is the freedom and flexibility. So I know, just ever since I've started, just being able to detach and just go to different places, meet different people. For me, that's what fires me up the most, is about making a successful business, is that it allows me the lifestyle and flexibility to meet new people and operate on my own schedule, because I've learned a lot about how I work best and the things that actually move the needle in business. And it's not doing design all day. It's not spending 10 hours in software. It's a lot of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, that I've grown to love and grown to get a lot better at. So, like I said, I'm always learning, and um, I realize that I'm young, so I have the advantage of moving fast and failing fast, and ideally trying to learn as many lessons as I can in that process. So I'm not shutting anything out at this point, but I am consciously going throughout business as I start, because I realize I'm young, that I can take the advantage of just getting started, being new, and still be forward thinking enough to build out these SOPs and build from the bottom as if I was thinking about selling it. Because even if I don't, it would still be a lot easier if I just go through the necessary steps now as if I were going to.
Yeah, there's two things that kind of jumped out at me there. The number one thing is that when you're talking about your customer, your clients, and different things of that nature, and we talked a little bit about this when we talked before. Um, I like this concept of this low-hanging fruit concept, to where there are businesses that you're working with, they're businesses that you can get, paid, that will help you generate revenue and pay the bills and different things like that, while you're working toward this bigger opportunity. And I think a lot of businesses get into a mode where, excuse me, get into a mode where, you know, I see this, the white whale that I'm going to get here, and
Mhm.
I spend so much time on that I miss the other opportunities that are there. And I start to not make the money I need to make to pay the bills and different things like that. And we shared, an experience I had years ago when I had my own business, and I spent, probably 6 months working on this one opportunity, spent a lot of time on it. It would have been a great opportunity had I got it, but I didn't get it. And so now I've wasted 6 months. I've wasted the time. If I actually tried to monetize how much that time cost me, you know, I can probably say that's a big reason that I stopped doing it.
Mhm.
So, but I mean, that's a big thing. You got to be able to pay the bills while you're actually building and growing. The other piece you mentioned is building the systems, and I think the systems are really what makes the difference between kind of the freelancer or the side hustle and different things like that, and the more traditional business, because the systems are what are going to allow you to run the business full time. And one of the books that I really like is E-Myth. So I don't know if you've read that or not, but it's a great book for entrepreneurs and small business owners, because it talks a lot about the systems and building the systems for the business. And it has a story in there of a woman who is a baker, and the baker goes and opens a bakery. She's, making cupcakes and bread or whatever she's going to sell there. Or I think it was pies or cakes. It was one of those two. And that's all she did. you know,
Mhm.
get there 4 in the morning, and she'd make whatever it was, pies or cakes. And, at the end of the day, and she would sell that. At the end of the day, she would clean up, go home, and right back at 4 in the morning. This is all she did. And she had to churn this to be able to do what she needed to do. And that's a lot of times because of the fact she didn't have the systems in place, which would allow her to actually have that flexibility to, one, have the product, do what you needed to do, bring in staff or whatever required, um, that would allow her to actually have a business. And I think the business is different from kind of the freelancing kind of thing. So
Mhm.
I think that's a great book. I know I've referred to that in our startup base class that we do for the Small Business Development Center for a number of years. I don't think I do it now, but I probably should, because I think it's a great piece. Let me ask you this, because I'm always interested. So you classify yourself as a creative.
Mhm.
So that's what allows you to do the graphic design and different things like that. Um, do you see any, other than what we've talked about, do you see any conflicts being a creative uh, in terms of being able to handle the entrepreneurial component? Because, in the years I've done this, we've had a lot of business owners um, that are creatives that are doing different things like this. And whether, it's a design piece or their creativity is harnessed in another way, um, that they have trouble focusing on the business part. And in some cases, they don't want to focus on the business part because they think
Mhm.
that it interferes with the creativity.
Yeah. Great question. And I see this a lot too. It's something I have to really like actively and consciously check myself on is what am I doing in a day that is growing the business and not just doing what I enjoy and what is easy? Because I mean, the law of friction, you're going to resort to doing the thing that you either enjoy the most or is the easiest. And I'll find myself maybe refining a design or like a footer on a website, something super minuscule that really just, feeds, my design soul. But I'm like, okay, at the end of the day, is this really growing the business? Is this what I want to be doing? Is this the best use of my time? Seeing I'm me and just a couple other people right now that are helping me out. that are running this. Yes, because you have to be really self-aware and check on yourself to see what are the things you're doing in the day that actually move the needle. But you also want to not lose, your passion for the thing, and make sure you're spending time in the software, because at the end of the day, that is a big part of what's making you money and adding to your credibility. So always learning new things, but making sure that you're balancing the things that are kind of, like we said, working in the business versus working on the business. Another thing that can be a trouble with creative entrepreneurship is that this concept of what looks good, what is good design, there are basic principles and there are rules, which I would like to think that I know, but it's also very subjective. People have different opinions, and a lot of it is this empathy piece that, that we try and get better at, is learning and really getting on the same page with, your principals, your partners, your customers, your clients, and knowing what they want. And a lot of the time, it's not the best thing that you can possibly create. For example, if a client needs a website and they need it turned around instantly, they're not looking for, a 6-month project that looks like Lululemon's or Nike's website. They're looking for something that has their information and their address, maybe a contact form, simple navigation, maybe a couple of photos, and that's what they're paying you for. They're not paying you to create Nike's website. So you have to balance the art of wanting to create the best thing possible versus what your customers actually want and what they're paying you for. Because I can create a website like Nike's. It would take a lot of time and I would have to contract out a lot of work. But I mean, a small business in Marysville or, rural Ohio is not looking for, a Nike website. So it's knowing what you can add the most value in, but also being aware of what the customer actually wants. And because this concept of design is very subjective. Another con of being creative and entrepreneurship is that you have to be organized. And I think I would say it's a stereotype, but creative people aren't always the most organized. I think I toe the line pretty well. Like, my mom is super, not high strung, but she's very organized, very clean. I didn't call her high strung. That was the word that came to mind, but she's very clean, very organized, very analytical. My father is a good balance of, disciplined, organized, thorough, but he's also very creative. So I think I toe the line really well, between being able to run a business and also being able to do some of the creative work as well. And like I said, this whole concept of balance, it's like, I read a book that said balance, the concept of balance doesn't actually exist, because when you're trying to achieve balance, you're actually going from one side to the other. So there's no actually true state of balance. But finding the best way that you can to still be creative and still also be a business owner and customer facing is something that you really have to check yourself on. And the thing that really validates it for me, whether I'm doing that, is my calendar. So if I'm spending a ton of time doing just creative work, like if 6 hours of my working day is all just pushing pixels and doing this stuff, then I know, especially at this phase, then I'm not doing enough to make outreach, to do customer facing stuff that's growing the business. And so it's keeping tabs on both and trying to achieve some kind of a harmony between being creative and being an actual business owner.
No, that's great. And so let me go along that same path, because you had mentioned, the Nike website versus what, they really want. What, as a business owner, what would you recommend that business owners do? Or you can flip it, what do you do for the business owner to really get an understanding of what they want? And sometimes is what they, and then let's say that they're kind of off track a little bit in terms of what they want. And we had another session with mixed marketing, and she was talking about, some of the things where she would deal with her business owner, entrepreneur, very client, very good at the business part of it, but we're kind of missing the mark. They wanted this logo because it meant something to them. It meant nothing to anybody else. And it never would mean anything to anybody else, or the business name or something like that. So what, you know, what do you do to get the entrepreneur to start thinking about the branding process and really understanding all of that, and or what should they be doing in advance of really having these conversations with a designer?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great topic, and it can be touchy as well because we any business owner, no matter if it's in design, especially if it's in design though, you are whenever you're doing anything customer facing, you are the expert. That is why they're hiring you. Um, and you have to find the line between pleasing them and doing what is actually effective for them. So a lot of companies, they don't have the greatest sense of, design scale of, how to tailor a logo, how to tailor a website that's specifically designed with their customer in mind. They know their customer. They know what they're trying to get them to achieve. They know when they go to a website, this is what the ideal result of that is, but they don't know how to translate that to a design that optimizes for that same result. So it's kind of collaboration is what I'm big on is okay, we're on the same page, we're on the same team. This is how I'm going to help you. And, maybe a little bit of that is explaining and education and the kindest way possible. That's like you can use the brand. That's because anytime there's as many emotions involved as there is with someone's own business, you can kind of get a lot of bias that comes up. And this is why I'd love to talk to you about feedback and why feedback I think is an absolute superpower, and how you can use that to your advantage, not just in creativity but also in business ownership. Is that you get these blinders on, and anytime that you have such strong emotions for your brand, your business, you have something that you want it to be completely your own, and that you've put all this time, sweat, and equity into building, then it's you get these biases. So it's a lot of it is working collaboratively, it's transparency. And I've had conversations where I'll say, okay, maybe for your industry, for your ideal customer, maybe this logo, this color scheme, this brand guideline doesn't quite optimize for it, but I'd be curious to hear your thoughts as to why you think this other thing works better. And another thing is that it's always better on the side of me, like the creative, to bias towards minimalism and consistency. And then you can always scale up from there. It sends a totally different message if you start with something, whether it's a logo or website, that's totally extravagant. And then having to scale it back from there is a much more difficult process than it is from starting from the skeleton, bare structure, hierarchy of a website, basic outline of a logo, something like that, to then scale it back, to then scale it up, than it is to start totally on the other end of things and then having to dial your way back and kind of find that happy medium. So if business owners are looking for creative or branding help, the first thing like Michael helped me with, which I'm very grateful for, is getting to know your target customers and what actions you want them to take. What do you want them to feel when interacting with your brand? I mean, you see these brands like Starbucks, Nike, Lululemon, um, all these brands that have really strong equity and authority. Apple, your customers feel a certain way when you interact with the product, and that's why they always come back. And design plays a huge role in that, Michael. Like whether it's design from the product to the branding, the colors, the interaction, the packaging, all this stuff, design plays a huge role in it. And it's why some of these creative agencies and companies get paid a lot of money to not just create it, but also maintain it, because it's what people come back to is that familiarity. Like when you have that, even like textures and small things like that, like a Starbucks cup, people go back and they spend $8 on a cup of coffee because of the experience, and I do it too, so I'm not judging anybody, but you get the experience that this brand offers you. Like you see the logo, you see the siren, you see the colors, the smells, the ambiance, all of that is branding. um and the opportunity that I have as a creative to work with people to build that and establish that, um and extend on that with design and creating something that accurately represents that, is a big responsibility and something I don't take lightly. So I always welcome feedback, and as much input as possible. I always say the more the better. I have a long creative questionnaire that I do before every project, And I prefer to meet in person, always do some kind of a call to just get a sense of where they are, how they want their brand represented, whether it's a logo or a website, especially if it's a website, because website's a big project. But you want to have them know that you're on the same team, you're collaborating, and you're just trying to create the best thing possible that still fulfills their creative idea for what the brand is that they've already built, but also extending on it and maintaining that consistency that, gets customers coming back and something that they can really have an experience with.
That's interesting because, and we've talked a little bit about this, but, you know, this is where I go to get my coffee in Marysville all the time. I go to Big
Mhm.
in Marysville, and that brand unto itself doesn't mean anything. But what I've done subconsciously or whatever is that I connect the experience that I have there to that. So,
Mhm.
if I'm going through Findlay, where am I going to get coffee at? I'm going to get it at Bigby. Or if I'm
Mhm.
someplace else, if I have the opportunity, I'm going to do that. And it's interesting that, this branding is not just about the color scheme and the this and the that, but it's really
Mhm.
about how you connect to your customer and how that customer views it. Because I've always heard, this is always how I've approached it, is that, you know, is say that I'm the designer, I can't make the brand. It's how the consumer interprets the brand. And my goal is to try to create something that will resonate, will speak, and that will convey what the business wants. But still, at the same time, it really is that consumer has to understand it. And if consumer is looking at it a little differently, um, that could influence how the brand is working for the business.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I heard this thing lately that really resonated with that speaks exactly to what you're saying is that entrepreneurs and business owners, they are creators and they are builders. They create things and they build things. And then creatives, designers, they make people feel things. So how can you bridge that gap between what the business owner has created and what they're building and their branding, their messaging, the experience they want to create? And how do you partner with a creative, a designer, a builder to make people feel what you want them to when they interact with your brand and product? So it's really a team effort.
Absolutely. And what what's your thoughts? And we talked a little bit about this before. You have the branding, which we've talked about, the branding of the website. Um, how does that, the design aspects, all of that, tie into the functionality of the site? Because again, my experience has always been that for a small business owner, that website really needs to speak for them when they're not there. So if somebody comes and lands on that site, it can be beautiful. It can be, even convey the brand. But if I land there and I don't have any idea what to do, or how do I connect, or what's my next step, then it's been kind of a waste. So what's
Mhm.
your take on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's as humans, we are visual creatures. So there's definitely, and I'm a designer, so I'm biased to the fact that anything that looks nice is gonna, hold a higher ticket item for me. But when you design a website, you want to focus on what you want the user to do, not what you want them to feel. So, for instance, there's so much that goes into creating a great user experience on a website, whether it's the functionality of buttons, page loading speed, um, proper navigation between pages. Everything's labeled property, alt tags, images, meta descriptions, all this stuff. But you start the design from what I do. I start the design knowing ahead of time what I want the user to do. That can be booking a call, that can be filling out a contact form, that can be a redirect, and that can be an email sign up. Those are the most common. And how do you work with the brand? Okay, you know what you want to accomplish. Now, how do we, and it can be none of those things. It can be just to tell the story of the brand. It can just be a landing page, a map, some kind of informing action like that. It doesn't have to be to create an action, but you work backwards from what you want them to accomplish, and then you tailor a design around to that. So you can get as creative as you want with implementing branding and telling stories in the company's unique way, but it's all tailored around getting something that's actually going to move the needle for their business and get them the results that they're looking for, whether it's email signups, informing the customer, maps, lead generation, or list building, anything like this, booking a call, any of these things. So you tailor the design around what you want the user to do, and not so much just making it look nice and pretty. So there's definitely a balance right there.
Absolutely. And so just a quick commercial for the SBDC. We at Columbus State, we have a 4-session marketing program, which is really about designing that marketing plan, which the branding is certainly part of. And that is actually in process right now. I think we're probably through week 3. So anybody who's interested, I think we do that on a quarterly basis. So you can go to the website and check that out. Bruce is putting some stuff into the chat. But that is really good because again, it's about this process of understanding yourself and understanding your business and then converting that. The other thing we have is a social media class. Now that may be coming up at some point in the near future. That's a 1-session, kind of a 3-hour thing, just kind of an intro. But what that is all about, again, is I think she calls it, Tanya Wilson does these classes for us. The plan before the social media. I don't know. It's the plan before something. Bruce will know what the title of it is, but it's all really about, when you're thinking about social media, it's about that plan. And how are you going to use it, and what are you going to do, and how are you going to pull it back into what you're doing. And we talked a little bit about this too. I think there's in some cases, individuals, business owners that prefer to use platforms like Facebook or Instagram or something else like that, rather than really investing in their website. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I just had a podcast about this the other week. And it's the difference between marketing on social media in terms of business effectiveness versus having a website and optimizing for the website itself. The website, and I've always said this, all roads lead to web. If you don't have an online presence apart from an owned platform like Twitter or X or whatever, Facebook, social media, Instagram, you don't own that audience because, I mean, whether it's Mark Zuckerberg or anyone else can wake up one morning and say, we're changing our algorithm, we're changing everything, we're changing something small, and that can totally interact and interfere with the way that your customers view you, see your brand, and have a chance to interact with you at all. So any audience that you can get outside of social media is far more valuable than anyone that you can host on a social media platform. I like to view it as social media is a very good for brand awareness and not so much brand conversion. So you'll see companies that optimize too much for social media marketing in the form of viral content on social media. And they'll get videos that have thousands, hundreds of millions of views, but they're not converting to any actual business for themselves because there's no actual business transaction that occurs on social media. It's all, if you don't have a funnel set up, if you don't work with a designer or a marketing agency to get that set up to where you are creating awareness through your social media, but it's also leading to a diversion into your website where you actually own the audience and people can interact with you off platform. And it's very hard to grow a business that way. You may grow a ton of awareness on social media, and it's good for quick updates for stuff that's very short half-life, like an announcement or something like that. But in terms of making business transactions, building long-term relationships, that comes in the form of, a brick and mortar website or with strong SEO and backlinks in the forms of blogs or any of these other things. So there's a lot of talk about it being outdated. Like websites aren't mainstream anymore because people spend so much time on social media, which is true. But there'll never be a social media platform that can monetize like a website can. You can own your own audience on like a website can. When you build a website, with your specific user. You can build a website and optimize it for your specific user. You have that flexibility, you have that freedom. On social media, it's very hard to tailor a user experience within a 3x3 video grid or a 90-second video, which we see a lot too many of nowadays. So yeah, that's a great point. Website design is more important than ever, especially in the age when social media is taking all of people's time. And like I said, social media is great for getting out awareness, but it doesn't lead to actual conversion and business growth. So it's kind of balancing the two of those, but social media is very important still.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's an important term for small business owners to think about, is this conversion. And you hit around the head, but I mean, it's what do you want this site to do? And you've got to think about it, because conversion is not the same thing for everybody. And you mentioned 4 or 5 different types of conversion. It's it's not just, hey, I'm going to run somebody here and they're going to buy on the site. You may want them to do something else that will get them to connect in a different way. You want to maximize, your connection with them, maybe email or whatever it is. So having that conversion, I think, is super important. And the class I was referring to, Bruce has advised me, is Social Media Strategy for Small Business, the plan before the post. And I had most of that except the post part. And I was thinking it was the plan before the pitch, and I knew that wasn't right. I'm not sure I didn't use that for something way back in the day where I was doing pitches for venture capital. But that's it. And I think that's a great session because it does get you thinking about it. And so many people show up to that session and don't really read the discussion of what we're going to be covering. And how do we jump straight to Facebook and start doing this? And it is I think it's a really good class to get you thinking as a small business owner. You mentioned your podcast, and I really like your podcast. You want to talk about that for a minute?
Oh yeah, sure. Thank you, by the way. It's the Creative Journal podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I started about 6 months ago. Set a goal to myself to upload every week. And Michael, I've gotten in touch with some people that I have no business talking to because I have that show. And it has, I mean, the Creative Journal is just, it's been the biggest learning experience of my life. I said we all kind of had these preconceived notions about, who we are. I grew up not being social. I wear 2 hearing aids. Took speech therapy growing up. I was like, I can't be the host of a podcast show. I can't create a good experience. I can't create value just from a conversation. And it's taught me that, if you bring the right people on and you ask the right questions, just the amount of value and knowledge transfer that can happen is absolutely incredible. And talking to people in the similar industry that go through a lot of the same things that you guys that we do, whether it's small business ownership, people that have been through the fire, there's so much value in just saying, hey, I'm young. In my perspective, I'm young. I'm looking for advice. And if anyone's looking for, some great business advice, how to be more creative or run a creative enterprise, there's a lot of good value that can be learned in just reaching out and talking to people, or from listening to shows like this or that. So,
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I always like about this, is that most of the people I have on, I mean, I've known for a long time. We haven't known each other very long, but I've known a lot of the people that you'll see as you go back and look at other episodes. I've known for years. So, but it's just always interesting to have it in this kind of format, because I can have conversations with folks. You and I've had conversations, but because that conversation wasn't recorded, that conversation wasn't put out here. The gems of wisdom that I may have put out, which probably wasn't that many, but gems of wisdom that you put out weren't shared with others. And I think that that's the beauty of doing this and having these kind of podcasts in a format where you just have this conversation and really just kind of bring the knowledge base of the other person and add your own knowledge to it, to really create a really positive experience. So I encourage everybody to check that podcast out, because it's really good. And they do. Andy does a great job with that. Um, we're about out of time, so let me, I guess, we've talked a lot about design and things of that nature, and I think that's really valuable, and that's what things I wanted to do. But, and you talked about some other things, but I want to just very quickly talk about, so given your age and your, kind of newness to the space, even though you've been doing some design work in the past, as this Gen Z type of entrepreneur, um, what's that been like for you? I mean, the positives and the challenges and things of that nature.
Hmm. Yeah, like I said, learned a lot. I mean, I feel like I've aged a lot in this past couple weeks. But one thing about being young in particular is that it's has a lot of advantages, but it also has some drawbacks too. For example, some people don't take you as seriously. Um, and I have dealt with that a few times, but if you look at it in a different light, it's like, okay, expectations are low. And that's one of the biggest things about being a business owner, especially in a service industry, is this concept of setting expectations. Um, if you set the expectations low, there's always a better opportunity that you're going to be able to over deliver. Under promise and over deliver, something I always try and do, because if you set the standards too high from the beginning, or you over deliver and you just really sell out for someone, which we all want to do, and it's a big temptation. It's something I still do a lot, I struggle with. Then there's nowhere to go but down when you're setting that expectation. So taking advantage, like when you're young, people don't expect much or more from you. But if you can prove, like I am, I've been told I'm pretty mature and rational, and um, but you can use that to your advantage and really try and empathize with people and say like, okay, I'm young, but I am also very mature and I have been in this industry, longer than some people have. So that's one of the spins on it. Um, Another thing that I've learned recently is that hard work, like I've always been a hard worker. I mean, but I've learned in business that hard work is it's the cost of playing. It's the cost of entry. Everyone works hard. Um, and while it is necessary and it's something that I always advise and always admire and always do, and I will always be a hard worker. And I think if you own your own business, like a lot of the people listening, then you're going to be a hard worker. There's going to be early mornings, late nights. It's just the cost of doing business per se. But how can you act smart, and how can you really detach and see how the actions in your day aren't just the results of you working hard, but actually putting concentrated effort into something that's going to move the needle? Um, this concept of leverage we kind of touched on a little bit is, okay, how can I take actions in a day that will create more leverage, whether it's offloading work, creating, advertisements, getting in a new market, something that's more creative and maybe people outside of your routine that you have to kind of sprinkle in there and be self-conscious about. How can you kind of create leverage? Because everybody works hard, and it's a lot easier to create that leverage and create some kind of advantage that's unique to you, rather than having to just try and outwork and not sleep. Because I've definitely been there, especially recently. But you have to find, the balances of, the disadvantages of being young, and also the advantages of it, because I know that I have a long road ahead of me, and especially if you're young, you have to operate with the mindset that you want to still move fast, but everything is experience and everything is learning. So, um, you, if you go into with the mindset of that, I think it's everything is experience and everything is learning. Then, especially while you're young, it's hard to fail. So,
Yeah, no, that's great advice. That's great advice for Bruce and I, being, younger into the space like this. Hey, we do have a question here. And we're going to end it after this, but this is from Sherry. You know, she's asking, is there a site that you recommend as a way to kind of, it sounds like, kind of create web page design that you can use to start the business and then transfer that maybe to your own business servers in 2 or 3 years. It looks like she may have been doing some things with GoDaddy was on their servers, and then when she missed the annual fee, which half the time. I can't remember when stuff's due.
Mhm.
Wasn't able to get access to it. So she actually did
Yeah.
a lot of that. Mhm.
Okay, so a couple things for Sherry. You can start on, so you can build your own website, and it's something I always recommend people do because you realize it is very hard. But you can do it. A couple platforms I'd recommend is I always try to steer people away from GoDaddy just because their hosting, in my experience, has been very unreliable, and that's just personal experience. But as far as site development, you can use Squarespace, Wix. There's a lot of no code tools. I personally use Webflow and WordPress for older sites. I prefer to use Webflow. But if you use WordPress, you can invest in some of these different builders like Elementor and Divi and Bricks plugins. And I can type this in the message if you want because I know this listed off a lot of names. But you can go with one of those, and there is a learning curve there in terms of design. But you can also buy a template. That makes it a little bit easier for you if you just want to get something off the ground and have some kind of an online presence. As far as hosting, you can there's a lot of nuance specifically, but if you buy a domain, you don't have to host it on that domain. You can transfer it to another host. So there's a lot of hosting platforms like there's GoDaddy, there's Hostinger, there's SiteGround, there's a ton of them out there. Bluehost is another one. I personally use Hostinger because there's very low hosting fees, which might be a good look to look into. But if you buy a domain from a hosting platform, oftentimes you have to wait X number of days or months before it allows you to transfer it because they want you to host that domain on their site. So there's a little bit of a friction period there. But if you want to export a site, that is a headache sometimes. You can package it up in a CSV, and some programs and developers will let you upload that CSV and try and translate the HTML and CSS code into that page. But you have to know a little bit of code to make it format well and flow well and all those other things. So depending on the size of your site, Sherry, you could reach out and I might be able to like give you some pointers and maybe send you a Loom on, walking you through like the steps of migrating, something like that. But the builders I recommend if you're just getting started, Squarespace I have found to be the easiest, and they have a vast template library. And for hosting, you can go either if you have to go with GoDaddy, you can, or you can go with something like a Hostinger that has very low monthly fees. So.
Great, great. Thank you. Bruce, did you get all that? I want to make sure you've got all those links and names and all that. So
Went fast on
no, that was great. And I appreciate it. And I know Sherry appreciates it. She's going to reach out. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I think this has been a great session on really kind of how to think about your design, your site, what you're trying to do. I do want to mention that we will be having a special edition of Small Business Breakthroughs on March 20th in celebration of SBDC Day. And you guys probably, that's very similar to Christmas and Thanksgiving. Everybody knows what SBDC Day is. But if you don't, basically it's just a national celebration of the work that small business development centers do. There are 25 SBDCs in the state of Ohio, and there's probably close to 1,000 SBDCs around the country, all doing great work to help entrepreneurs and small business owners basically build their dream. So we will be having a special session on the 20th, still working on the guest. We'll have that. And then we will be also coming back on the next date when this is supposed to be held. I think that's maybe the 28th of March. And we're looking forward to being able to share some great information there. Andy, again, thank you for being here, Chaz and Susie and the whole Dublin Entrepreneurial Center team. Thank you for your support and all that you do. And we'll close out, Andy. Is there one thing that you want to recommend, or what? I guess I always kind of like, if you're watching this or if you're in the chat or something like that, and you want to think about your branding, and what's one thing that you might recommend that they do like today, just to
Yeah.
kind of get started.
Yeah, great question. I thank you also for having me. Like this, and it's a great experience. I know, first of all, if anyone's looking to grow their business, get in touch with like-minded professionals. You know, these organizations at the DEC, things like Noble, all these things I've been to have really moved the needle for me personally. So the first thing I would recommend to people, like I said, I know I'm young, but getting involved in some kind of community where you feel like you're being looked after is a big first step. And getting out of your shell like that is huge. When it comes to branding and design, it really just comes down to knowing who you are and how you want that represented. And you don't have to be a subject matter expert to get started. Um, you can always get started on your own. You know, you can use these. Design is more accessible to people than ever. You have, like we just talked about with Sherry, you have your no code builders. You can get online just like that. You can use tools like Canva and Illustrator and Photoshop, all these tools that are available to everyone. And there might be a bit of a learning curve, but being creative and expressing your brand in some way has never been more important, especially in a crowded ecosystem like today, where people are just bombarded with new brands and high quality content. So if one thing that people can do today is just write down what they want their brand to be, create something that you want represented. Maybe you're drawing your logo, maybe you're getting online, but I would really encourage people to get online somehow and just exercise any aspect of creativity in your own business, whatever form that may take.
Great. Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone again for being here. And I hope you've gotten great information that's going to help your business from today. And don't forget to go to our YouTube channel. This will be up on there the next couple of days, as well as the other. I think we're somewhere in year 3 on this. So a lot of great content on there. And also check out Andy's podcast also, because I think that's a great source for information for you. And with that, I want to thank you all again, I guess like the 3rd or 4th time, but you guys have a great day and best of luck to you going forward.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.